So one of my legitimate longest Twitter friends and actual friends in reality is you. I've known Adam for actually, I think this year in May will be like 13, 10 or 11 years, something like that. Like I met you.
Time goes by so quick now. I
Dude.
know it's like I shaved so I'd look good for the show, and I got rid of all these gray that are. I used to try to pretend that they were blonde, but my wife's like, honey, you're not fooling anybody now. They're just gray.
She doesn't like the salt and pepper look?
More than salt and pepper. It's just gray. Lots of gray.
Dude, that's crazy. Can you remember off the top of your head when you did Rogan to promote the Culture High?
Well, let's see. The Culture High campaign, because we released in 2014, so we would have done the campaign in I think 2012.
Well, yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
So would have been, and I'm trying to think. Yeah, that was the first time I was on, right? Because then that's when I introduced. I saw a lot of comments. That was when people first realized what crowdfunding and Kickstarter was, right? When you used to be able to. They used to be more free reign when you'd promote them on social media sites, right? Now the algorithms have changed where you have to pay, otherwise they just crush them right down. The Culture I was able to legit go viral, right, in the cannabis community, and it went everywhere. I think, I'd have to, if you look at and right after it released, I think in 2014 or 2015 was the last two times I've been on. And now it's funny because Rogan was big then, but I mean, he's an absolute cultural staple now, right? Where everyone's like, Adam, can you connect me to Joe? I'm like, dude, fuck off. I'm not connecting you to Joe. I was like, I don't even reach out to him, that often. I feel bad because even every time I reach out to him, I'm asking him for something to interview for one of my films or something, right? Yeah. So I try not to have that relationship of asking anybody for anything that, at least whenever Joe did our thing, like the Culture of the Union, those are things he was interested in, right? So he did want to speak on them, right? But you do get aware that another one of those people asking for his time.
Yeah, no, I get it, man. And so it was shortly after then, it was back to the algorithm in social media when when the algorithms were actually open and you could post things, people would see it, things would go viral organically in a different way. They go viral now, but it's a different thing. I feel like a lot of things people are pushing levers to make sure certain things, in certain categories go viral.
It's hard to break through. We saw this with our last film, the documentary Bisbing, about Michael Bisbing, that the only time we really broke through a lot of things is when Bisbing talked about on his show and when Dana White promoted it. It broke through. You could kind of see all of them would hit kind of a plateau and just stifle, but those two surpassed it because you can still go viral organically, but it is harder because anytime you're promoting things to get a sale, whether it's tickets for an event, right away, the algorithms, they want you to buy ad space for that, right? So they just stifle it down where you used to be able to post that. We released the Culture video and, everybody in the cannabis community around the world was talking about it. I was getting reached out. Everyone was like, page and it not be talking about your kid. And right when it plateaued is when I was working with Joe to find a perfect time to go on. Right when, because I looked at other crowdfunding campaigns, and normally after the 2 weeks is when everybody kind of gets burnt out and it starts to taper down. And then that's right when I went on Rogan, and then it just went like that and went overfunded.
So because I brought up this is kind of like the leading question I'm having for a lot of the guests, because for the last decade or so, from the brick and mortar business that, I was running with some friends who know, to podcast production, to digital marketing and stuff, I've been doing my thing like I had been when I first met you, but I stopped doing my own podcast, which I had you on several times, the Pursuit podcast. And now it's kind of like, okay.
Great. I was kind of disappointed.
No, so was I. Trust me.
Off to bigger and better things.
Well, in retrospect, I should have kept it going, and it would have probably grown exponentially with what I was doing and the people I was doing it at the time. But such is life. And now I'm in a new area. I told you I'm in Central Texas, and I'm still doing all the other things. And you're actually in Houston right now, which is funny enough.
Yeah.
You reached out. Dude, you reached out to me in December, and I was like, yeah, totally. And literally, this all transpired shortly after that. So I was like, all right, I know we're going to connect either way, but I'm glad you were able to make it and visit family and do what you're doing. Your boy's got a jiu-jitsu competition there, so that's exciting.
Well, it's a bummer because I actually screwed it up. I got the dates wrong. When I set it up at Smooth Comp, I must have looked at to enter and not the dates, so there's no tournament. So my parents are disappointed they don't get to watch.
Oh no.
The private with this Zal, and I couldn't, and the tickets, well, since COVID, all the airlines do this bullshit where if you get the basic fare, you can't change it, you can't cancel it, you can't alter it, you can't get credit for it, you cannot change your seat. So I was like, well, mom, dad, good news is we're still coming. Bad news is you don't get to see the boys compete, which is too, but they all want to come watch them roll with the Zell and jump in the kids' class today. So
That's cool. Airlines are some of the biggest criminals, but that's a different topic of conversation. Hey, before I ask you this question, are you on Wi-Fi? Because it's starting to go in and out a little bit.
Yeah, I am on Wi-Fi.
Okay, just making sure it's working.
Yeah, I'm on my parents' Wi-Fi. Do you want me to maybe? I see my hotspot just kicked in. You want to maybe shut that off? Would that be maybe interfering with it?
It might connect better, but yeah, we can try without it.
Okay, let me just try to make sure I turn that off so it doesn't bother it there.
Also, a great word that I got from Adam a decade ago that I still use is creative hustler. I feel like that was on your business card back in the day. I don't know.
I use that without it. So how many times have you used it?
Oh, dude, I use it all the time. Anytime something like that's the best way you can encompass like what I do, and I guess what you do, because it's so out of the box of most people's day-to-day life that you're like, well, creative hustler.
For me, is that one time when they said you are legit, or I use it. Someone said you're two fellow creative hustlers, and I loved it from there. It's the ethos of my company now. We put it right on there, and people be like, "You put hustler on your thing?" It's like, yeah, creative hustler. Like we will get it done. Like it's not meant in the derogatory term of a hustler that like steals from people. It's just that like you're doing now with your business or anyone that owns their own business, you have to be a hustler because you cannot just go, oh, well, it didn't work. I'm out of money and I failed, right? You have to be like pivot. Okay, that didn't work. Have to go secure other financing or change my job or alter the way my business is operating. Like you find a way. Instead of finding excuses, you find solutions to get over those obstacles. Because those obstacles, they're going to come in everything in life. Like whether it's sports, whether it's martial arts, whether it's business, they are going to come. They don't, you've heard it in music and stuff forever, like more money, more problems, more success, like more challenges, just you get offered with different challenges. And now the nice thing is I've been through so many with my docs that when something comes up, I'm like, oh, so this is the challenge on this project, right? This is what we have to use our creative hustler ethos to get over on this one. Yeah. Sometimes, for us in the doc world, sometimes it's talent is really hard to deal with. Other times the talent is amazing. And then do we have enough money, or we went over budget, or like we can't get the sale we wanted? Like there's always something. It's just, what is it? So my partner, my producing partner, just kind of like, oh, so this is what we're going to be dealing with on this one. Okay, bring out the creative hustler gloves. Let's go.
So in the name of business, so this is, I put this podcast under the category of entrepreneurship / self-development. And like I met you in my early 20s. I'm now in my early 30s, which is crazy to say.
Crazy, yeah.
You're probably have you hit 40 yet? Are you early 40s?
I'm in my early 40s, brother. That's where the grays, I can't hide them anymore.
It is insane. So in the name of that, of business and self-development, like how have the last 10 years treated you is my leading question to guests. Because a lot of the guests I'm having on first are a lot of people I interviewed over the last decade. So from the early days of, did you even call it Scorgie Productions early on? You didn't, did you?
Yeah, it was Scorgie Productions. But when you first met me, Rod, like I was still trying to make it like a passion project. Like I was trying to do, instead of producing as a hobby, that was the main thing. So over the course of 10 years, or since it's been longer, like now all I do is full time. I have another job. I produce feature docs 24/7. That is my job. Getting the next one financed, getting the one in production sold. That is all I do. So things have gone really good, not without its challenges like everything else, but our last two films, Inmate Number One, The Rise of Danny Trejo, and Bisbing, have been two of the most successful documentary acquisitions that Universal Studios Pictures Universal has ever released. So I have a great relationship with Universal. When we had first met, I'd never done a studio film. We'd got Ice Guardians and Culture High on Netflix, which it's funny because ever since those last two films, I can't get back on Netflix. It's like impossible to get on Netflix nowadays. Netflix is really, if you probably notice with their content too, is they go, it's almost becoming like reality television stuff is getting, and even their docs are much more like relationship and like Tinder swindler. Like they're all about their algorithm, and they've realized it's much more of like a female audience that gets into certain stuff. And I guess for lack of a better word, mine's very like male narrative driven, right? So they're not as interested in it.
It's very toxic masculinity, like, as they say these days.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So because we did Danny Trejo, Michael Bisping, we're doing Dolph Lundgren. I team to tell, right? And we've never changed our way and our ethos of doing it, right? We always want to tell the best story possible. And we usually put 2 to 3 years of our life into each one. It's a lot of work, but always very proud of the finished product that we have. But yeah, so now I've got an output deal with Universal, which is incredible. I'm one of the only guys in Canada that kind of has that for feature docs. So things have gone really good in the last 10 years. I think when we first met, I only had my daughter, and now I have 3 kids.
I know, that's crazy. Dude, so how did you go from, for the entrepreneurs out there who might be in similar industries or just anybody, how did you go from that? What was the bridge from not having any kind of like Universal type deal and barely, getting stuff onto the Netflix platform to then bridging the gap of this, very unique deal that you have with Universal and all the projects you've done since then?
It's a great question. Not without lots of failures, man. Lots of failures. I went through all kinds of battles, and really, it came down to we made content that people wanted to see. Right. I think, especially in my industry, it might be the biggest disconnect is you have a lot of creators that want to tell a story for them, whether it's scripted or it's fictional or factual. People are like, I got it. Everybody thinks they have the best project ever, right? But there's so much content out there, you don't have the best project ever, right? And really the way I judge it is, does the audience, does it connect, release it? Do they like it, right? Where I think some filmmakers it's more for them. And that's why sometimes you'll make a great film that'll win all kinds of awards, but nobody watches it, right? It doesn't get seen, especially today when there's so much content out there. Like, how do you connect with an audience, right? There's more now than ever: short form, long form, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, feature films, Disney Plus. There's a million. So I think what we always did is our business is good. We always tapped into things we knew had a built-in audience, right? Like Danny Trejo, we knew people would come for him. Michael Bisping, we knew the MMA audience would come for him. And of course, you always want to make something that if somebody isn't from that market, like from that target market, stumbles upon it, like, oh my God, I had no idea that was such an incredible story, that Bisping had the real life Rocky story, that Danny Trejo was almost executed in prison, or that, Dolph Lundgren was a, Fulbright full ride scholarship as a chemical engineer to MIT. Like, you're always trying to get that thing that people are like, I had no idea. But you want to make sure that you tap into that built-in audience first. Because for docs, we don't have $2 to $3 million to market. We usually don't even have a couple 100,000 to market. So it has to kind of connect to an audience organically or easy for the distributor to connect to be successful. And that was something, I guess, coming from a sales background and a business background, that always related to me. Is like, well, it has to do well for the distributor. They have to do well with it. Then you get repeat business, which is what really separates the people that stay in the film business for a long time and did a one and done, or as a hobby for them. It has to be repeat business, has to make money. And yet I can even see some filmmakers like, oh, but what about the art and this? I'm like, yes, you have to have a balance. You want to try to be true to the story and be true to the art and true to what your message is. But you also have to make money for the people putting it in, or they don't come back. Nobody, not even, I always mean this where, like, and I'm sure you experienced in your business too. People think like, oh, we'll just talk to this billionaire and he'll give us money. And if it doesn't work, like, he don't care. I'm like, no, billionaires are I've met several. They're the cheapest people I know. They don't want to lose $1,000. That's why they are a billionaire, because it's a game to them of winning everything. So when you think, oh, we're just gonna have this business plan and they're going to lose money and they're going to be okay with it. No, not at all. So early on, I figured out I had to learn how to make it a business and not a hobby. And that's really how we climbed the ranks. Like, we'd win, do well financially it's funny because in the film world, if you look, like, we've still never been accepted to any of the like tier 1 festivals, like never TIFF, Cannes, South by Southwest, like never. We never get into them, but we'll be the best selling doc of the year. So I'm kind of like, okay, we didn't get into your festival, but we were number 1 on iTunes in 6 countries. Looks, your films that, you had in there, nobody watched. Some of them nobody watched. So, that's kind of how we kept moving up. And then Universal had a meeting with us. So like, last 2 films have been amazing for us. So they're buying our 3rd one, Breaking Olympia, which will be releasing this fall, about Phil Heath. And then they want to, like I said, we have basically an output deal with them where they want to see the rough cut of Dolph. They want to look at everything we're doing.
That's awesome, dude. So it's funny. Yeah, you were talking about billionaires. Like they're the most risk adverse people. If you read about them, like the Warren Buffetts and Charlie Mungers and these people, they're not taking a ton of money to try to make a ton of money. They're trying to make as much money with as little money as possible.
And they don't like to lose. Like even, yeah, $10,000 to them isn't much, but it's about the game of, they don't like to lose. They look at that as a loss. Like, they know, why would I lose? I can put it in this and I can guarantee to win. So whenever I meet young filmmakers, they're like, oh, I know this guy. I'm like, no, that's a horrible business model. Get that out of you. That is like saying that, like when people would go films and they'll show their business model, where they're getting their numbers from. They'll be like, oh, well, Blair Witch did this, and I know this billionaire. I'm like, man, you may as well list lottery winners that live in your hometown and say these people live, like, it's about the same. It's a ridiculous ask and is unreal. And as soon as you can make whatever your hobby is that you want to make a business, the sooner you can make it a business and not a hobby, the sooner it will treat you that way. Same for you, Rob, when building the podcast.
And funny enough, the brick and mortar business, the cryotherapy business that Giselle and I ran for a couple of years, all came from podcasting, right? It was from listening to Rogan, interviewing people, going to, business conferences about, the sports and recovery industry. All these things all came from the podcast, which is kind of like, it's like podcast adjacent, but it came from like taking the podcast seriously, if that makes sense. But I was going to say too, whenever you're making something, to tie it also back to business, do the investors or the people you're pitching it to ask you about the like in business it's called like TAM, right? Like the total addressable market. Like if it's a market that's too small, they're like, there's really not enough people to make this money back and then some. Is that a point of contention sometimes with people?
It comes, you see, with our investors, like, look, in the film industry, I'll be brutally honest, like, if you're looking solely to make money, like, no investor, film is the worst. Like, you're way better. Any real estate thing is way better, like bond, like, it is not a great. So I'm always very honest with I only go to investors that have disposable income that they can play, with whatever they invest. They're not worried about getting it back in like 6 months. We're like, yeah, put in the money. Like, where is it now? Because by the time we shoot the doc, edit the doc, and then even once you sell it, you have to wait for the release schedule. And once it airs is usually when the distributor pays. So that money can be sitting for 2 to 3 years. So I always tell them, we always make them money. They always get interest on their money, but it isn't high. Like, so I always, if you're looking for exponential gains, don't invest with us. Like, that's like right out of the gate, the first thing I said. But I'm like proud of and inspired and say, hey, I helped those guys do it and make a little bit of money on top, for a long term. Then boom, we're your guys. We haven't lost it. All of our investors have made consistent money over the last decade. They've never lost. I was like, but we do hang on to the money for a while. It takes a while for it all to come in and pay it out with interest. So we're going to a certain type of investor right out of the gate, right? We're not like going to like a tech company guy. We're like, hey, you could put in 100 grand and you could get 4 million back. Like, that's just not, because even if our movie crushes, like some of our do, we're finding out, even with Bisbing, Universal saying is crushing all these numbers. So we're like expecting life-changing back end. And then after marketing costs and processing fees, it's like, oh, there's still nothing there, right? So really what you build is the ability to do more business with them. And what you try to do is each one, you try to say, well, we're going to take more money up front because we know the back end is so far away. We're going to take more money up front. Or if they lock you into some kind of first look deal, you're like, well, you're paying me just to make sure you get a first look deal at anything that I have come through, type of thing. So
when you're in the war room of like, you're trying to market a particular project, are there new things that are coming to the table about how to market stuff from 10 years ago, or are people still staying pretty traditional on how they market these things?
That's it. Right. You got great questions, but the industry.
I'm a professional, Adam Scorgie. I've been doing this for a long time.
You definitely are. Those are great questions. Well, in our industry, because it's changing so fast, I don't think they know them till it kind of bites them on the nose, right? Because like, look, 5 years ago, the only streaming site was really Netflix. Now, most people are like, I might get rid of Netflix and just keep Paramount or Amazon or whatever, right? Like, so the market has flipped on its head, right? Where, I even look at stuff we did. I'm like, man, if we were to release this 10 years ago, it's the only doc anybody would be talking about. But now, like, you release Bisbing and like, oh, a Star Wars series is for free, like essentially for $10 a month on Disney. Like, built in 4 generations of fans that are going to tune into that. So that's what you're competing in. So I don't think everyone's trying to figure it out now. Like Showtime just laid off all their staff. HBO just redid everyone. Like everyone now is trying to get into the streaming thing. And there's, like any business, there's pros and cons to that. The pros is there's more content getting made. The downside is really tough because now you're competing against monsters. Like for me in the doc world, my competitors now are like LeBron's company. Pro athletes now have production companies doing docs. LeBron has one. Shaq has one. Ryan Reynolds has one. The Rock is involved. Like that's off pitching against now. People are kind of like, why would we go with you when we can go with The Rock, right? Or why would we go with you when we go with LeBron? And I'm like, well, LeBron's not really doing it. He's on the basketball court, right? So you're dealing with other people just like me. And because I'm smaller, I will give you more time and more effort and more passion. You will be one of 500 projects for them. With me, you'll be one of 3. So that's the only way I can sell. So that's the businesses. They don't, on the other side, they don't really understand. A lot of them are still kind of doing their old ways. And some of the old ways have kind of bounced back a bit. Like with Universal, they don't put it on streaming sites. They still release through traditional transaction and they still make money doing that, right? Being that, because a lot of people now are like, I don't want 10 streaming sites. That's just like cable was 15 years ago, right? Where you got to buy all the bundles. So it's kind of bounced back a little bit. Some people are getting rid of them all. They're kind of like, man, other than one series, which I'd rather just order it when it comes in than pay a monthly fee that keeps going up. So the market's shifting. They don't, from what I've seen with distributors, none of them really know. They all want that slam dunk, but they don't honestly know what's going to hit.
Do you think a platform that was just, and this kind of sounds maybe like a silly question when I say it out loud, because you could find documentaries on HBO, on Netflix, on these, but remember back, like, I don't know, at the height of these crazy governmental lockdowns, there was this platform that was coming out called Quibi, I think it was.
Yep.
And it was
Quibi,
like
yeah.
short. Yeah. Were you familiar with it? Quiver?
Quiver. Was it Quiver? Yeah. I remember hearing something about it.
But it was like a flash in the pan, right? And I think it was supposed to be like vertical, short form. I don't know. I heard people talking about it, and it got me to think that, like, what if there was just a platform that was just for documentaries? Does that exist, or is that a silly question?
No, I think they might have. Maybe they don't. I don't know. See, docs are kind of in that strange place where, even when they're a grand slam compared to a movie, they don't make money, right? Like, $100 million selling doc, like a Michael Moore, whatever, is like, that's like an opening weekend for a big film, right? Like it's nothing, right? Or an episode of Game of Thrones, they spend 20 million an episode or something like that. So
greatest show ever, by the way.
Yeah, I love the show. House of Dragon, we'll see how the next seasons go, but it's like I jumped into it because of Game of Thrones.
Of course.
Docs have kind of found their what they call the golden era of docs right now, because when you subscribe to some, like one of these big shows that will keep you in there, like the long episode, like Game of Thrones, you tune on HBO Max because you want that whole series. If they have great docs that are part of that, you're like, oh, this looks interesting. I'll tune in. The algorithm obviously knows what you're watching and sees and will hone you in. So people will tune in. But I don't know if docs could ever be that successful to where you could just do it. I don't know. As much as I'm a doc guy, I don't think they generate enough revenue to do that. Like everybody loves them, but it's, like even if it was the greatest doc, like people aren't running to the theaters to see them, right? They want, like, theaters pretty much exclusive for like big action movies and stuff like that nowadays. But where I think docs, again, have kind of found their niche is that when people want something real and that emotionally moves them and it's the right time, that, they don't mind if it's already on a subscription or whatever, that they'll order it, right? Or they'll rent it or whatever.
So have you seen the numbers for the new Mario film?
No.
Oh, dude, it's like the second or third largest like animated release in domestic history.
I'm not surprised. I mean, there's so much nostalgia for that. Like, even though I hear that, like, the people are like, they're crushed, the reviews are getting crushed, right? Like they're not loving it or whatever. But I mean, that's a whole other, we could spend a whole subject on that.
No, the people are loving it. The critics are not loving it.
No, well, critics have gotten, and this will get me panned, but like, dude, critics have found themselves, they think they're way more important than they are, right? If I'm honest, a lot of critics, let's be straight up on it, a lot of critics became a critic because they couldn't make it as a fucking producer or creator, right? So instead of adding anything to the industry, they critique other people's hard work. And what bugs me about critics, because we had this with like Danny Trejo and stuff, is people would say, oh, the film really missed an opportunity to talk about, you know, the racial disquality for Latinos and stuff like that. These are things we asked Danny. He didn't want to talk about them because he said, he's like, yeah. He's like, when I was younger, the only time cops ever came to talk to me is when I was under arrest for something. He's like, and 99% of the times I deserved it. I was doing armed robberies. I was doing stupid shit, selling drugs, fighting.
Yeah.
I deserved it. Like,
try calling him Latinx and see how he responds to you calling him Latinx. I don't think he's going to like
it. It was weird to see the reviewers be like, man, dictate what you think Danny's story should be instead of letting him dictate what he wanted. One of the other notes we got from a very prominent film festival, I won't say which one, but they wrote, this is when like the woke shit was really coming in, and they said, Danny's story is too macho and grandizing for me that I couldn't. And I was like, he's telling you how he survived prison and getting stabbed, and he put books in there to protect himself. And like, I was like, and you're saying that's macho? And I didn't even know what that phrase meant. I'm like, macho and grandizing? Because he's telling like, what, you think everybody should hug and play fucking kumbaya in prison, and that's how it works? Like Danny said, Danny was like, hey, he's like, you might not be racist before you go into prison, but you immediately become racist when you go into an American prison, because they divide there. In the Latino crews, you're in the Aryan Nation, you're in the Black, you do it to survive. And when you get out, you can change that again. But he's like, when you're in there, whether you want to be or not, by color, that's how you survive, right? So you can have this idea of how you want society to be. So I couldn't believe when these reviewers were telling, I'm like, man, this is Danny's story. And then one of the other notes we got, they're like, it's also too seamlessly put together. It's way too smooth and slick. And I was like, doesn't that mean we're great fucking producers and editors? Like it's too, what, you wanted it to be more jaggy and shitty footage? Like that would, like the note, I remember me and my director reading, and we're like, these are the most fucking, like, who are these people that are giving these critiques to not wanting to have the film in there? But, you know, that I don't know what your original question was there, but it is interesting.
I love that I asked you about critics, because I can see how fired up you get about it.
It drives me, because I'm fine with like a good critique. It's like, hey, they kind of lost here, it ran a little long or something like that. And some of those ones, I mean, yeah, I had arguments with the director about that. But other ones, when it's like a personal like feeling or ideology that they have that they didn't see in the film, and therefore the film is bad. And I'm like, dude, do you even know how to turn on a camera? Or like the challenges, like, especially when you'll hear like a critique about something stylistically, when I'm like, oh, you've never made a film. You have no idea how challenging it is to fix the critique you're making, because you have no idea. To me, I argued a few critics early on. Now I don't waste my time, but when I was first starting, people would make, I was like, dude, to me, a lot of critics, like, if you film or been involved in production, you have no business being a critic. And critics are like, no. They're like, I disagree with that. I'm like, dude, it's like a pro athlete. You think a pro athlete's going to get like guidance or training from someone that's never trained? Like, and then they try to make the analogy. They're like, well, how about hiring figure skaters to work with hockey players? I'm like, oh my God, that is so dumb. Of course, an Olympic figure skater can skate and they can do edge work and stuff that they could teach a hockey player. That makes sense. But you're not going to get some fat guy that plays fucking Nintendo teaching a pro baseball player how to correct a swing, right? Like, no, you're not. And you're not going to get a good critic that hasn't been involved in the industry, that hasn't written, produced, directed, been a cinematographer, provide any kind of critique other than, to me, just a personal feeling and blind ideology, or that they want to infiltrate into the film. They want to be able to. And then there's the whole business side, where if you're become a top critic, you're almost known for smashing films. And then that's your way of getting kind of known, is that this person's very tough. And I don't have a lot of, even though we've had a lot of good reviews, like a lot of the reviewers, I'm just like, man, like how did you get this title?
Yeah,
like,
they just become characters, and they pander to the people that are wanting to, you know, be on their side because they're so hard on the film or whatever. So those people are the kind of people that go to Twitter and they find an old tweet of yours and then send it to your boss and then try to get you fired from your job.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, he said bro here, right? Or something like that. And I'm like, what? Like, yeah. So I'm very careful on Twitter. I don't engage in any, like, early on in my career. And it sucks because I kind of listened to our boy I listen to Joe's advice on this, right? Like, I mean, no one probably experienced more than what he did with how he became so early on. When you're doing films, you'll skim through all the positive stuff, right? And you'll like it and retweet it, like it, retweet it. But then it'll be the one negative fucker, right? Out of 100. And that's where I listen to, like, with Joe's voice, like, don't waste your energy. That's their attention. So now I just ignore. Like, it doesn't matter. You could make the most perfect film. People have no idea if you almost died trying to make it or the challenges you went through. Some jerk is going to go, it was lame, production stuff, blah, blah, blah. And so I just don't care anymore. I really, like, again, I know, kind of like you're seeing with Mario, where it's like, okay, it's crushing the numbers. The audience loves it, which is who you make it for. You don't make it for the critics. If the audience are loving the nostalgia, enjoying the film, job well done. Did it make your investors and everybody money? Job well done. The critics and stuff, who cares? The trophies and stuff that come, that's.
I want to say it was 100 million to make, and it's already, I think it surpassed 400 million, and it's only been out like 2 weeks.
Damn.
So I'm looking at, I like movies, dude, but I like docs more. So I mean, the last movie I watched was John Wick and Mario, but before that, I don't think I've seen a movie like that came out since like the last Avengers, right? Because I'm a Marvel dork. But
yeah, I'm a Marvel dork too. Yeah.
Awesome. See, that's why we're friends.
Yeah.
So the tomato meter, and I only use this because everyone always references Rotten Tomatoes. What kind of a I don't know, power does it have to sway people from watching something if they see, like, for instance, Mario's got a 96% audience score with over 10,000 verified ratings and a 57% from the tomato meter of only 200 reviews?
See, I think a lot of those now, and we saw there was no better example than the Dave Chappelle one, right? That I think it had a 0% from the critics, but it was a 99.9 with like 1 million ratings. Like, double check my numbers, what we were saying, if you've got it in front of you. But like that one, that's where you saw that movie reviewers now are not doing their job. It's become a political statement, right? Because they didn't like what he joked about, so they attacked him on the critics to make sure that he had horrible reviews. But the audience loved it because comedy is meant to be a free form. You're supposed to challenge ideas and crazy political views and stuff like that. That's what good funny is. That's what good comedy is.
That one's 95% from the audience and 40 from the tomato meter.
So the tomato meter went up. Originally, I remember when the first month it came out, it was like below 20. It was, and to me, there was articles then written saying, this is where you see critics have now lost their way. It's now become
2 years ago.
Yeah, it became a political statement. It had nothing to do with his. It became because they didn't like that he was making fun of certain members of certain party, like sexual orientations, whatever else, and they wanted to show you can't do that. We're going to try to end your career. And that to me is the power where critics have lost their way. That's not your job. Your job is not to persuade people to watch things based on its religious, ideological, or sexual orientation. Even if you don't like the message, like, I can tell you, there's a lot of movies I'll watch that get all these awards and everything. I'll be like, oh, that was boring as hell. But I could see why people liked it, right? Like, I can see from a production standpoint, shot beautifully, great storytelling. Not my story. To me, it's too slow, too boring. I would like to see more happen, but I can respect it because I've produced, so I know how hard that is, right? I can come from a place where if I were to give it a review, I'd still probably give it, I'd say, hey, not my story, but beautifully put together, great performance by so-and-so, great cinematography, overall a great film. But if you don't like drama, it's probably not your thing, but that would still be a positive review, right? Like, but the reviewers now, it's become political statements. It's become, so the tomato meter to me doesn't mean nearly as much as it did a decade ago. But we have, like, I mean, I think Ice Guardians and Inmate are both 100 on there from both critics and views. If you check, I think our average on there is still pretty good.
I think so. I actually pulled up the Culture High, and that was at 91. So if you've seen, I mean, it was so well done, dude.
Thanks, brother.
And I also got to, it was at the time, there was a platform, I don't know if it's still around, but we were doing, what was it? I can't remember the platform, but you allowed people to basically host a premiere in their city, right? Remember that? I think it was Tug.
Tug.
Yeah. All right. I think that might have been an Austin company too.
You brought one to Houston, sold it out. Like, actually, man, is Tug still around? That's interesting.
Yeah, let me go ahead and look that up because that was a really cool idea. And I think it was an Austin-based company. which is what it's a weird thing to type into my browser now. 10 years later, I'm just gonna type in Tug.
Yeah.
But let's see if it's still around. Tug Inc. Nope. Tug. Would it be TUG or
No,
TUGG?
it's TUGG.
Okay.
Tug.
Okay.
That way, yeah.
Let me see. That was a really cool idea, and it allowed you to just sell basically a film that you wanted to come into your town. And if you
And then
sold
you could make your ticket prices and make a little bit of money on it, and it alleviated the pressure from the producer to having to do it. And that was kind of that great bond that we built, like becoming friends through this, where it was like, you know, it was great for me to do a premiere because my family and friends and stuff were down here. But then it was cool where I could throw you a bone and be like, hey, if you can put a couple $100 in your pocket and we could sell some out, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, so I didn't find a website. They do have a Wikipedia. I'm trying to see here if it's still around. Official website. Does it still? No, it doesn't. It's no longer around.
Damn.
That's
See, that's where like things have really changed, Robert, since you and me were the industry keeps changing so quick. Like streamers have kind of eliminated a lot of that, and then COVID and then everything else, like theater was a thing that like they were wondering after COVID, they were a thing of the past. Thankfully, they've kind of bounced back. People are like, no, I want to go, because there is nothing better. I'm sure we all have it. There's like, you know, in the new Spider-Man, when you had all three of the, you know, the main characters come together. I remember the theater I was in was cheering and people were standing. Some people were literally had tears, right? Because the first Spider-Man is actually when I would have first moved to Houston and was going to college in my early 20s when it was Tobey Maguire and then Andrew Garfield. Like you grow up with these people. So like there is so much nostalgia and kind of like the changing of the industry and the story that I remember even me, I was like, man, that pulls the heartstrings a little bit to have all of those there. And I like how, because looking back, like Tobey Maguire is kind of the dorkiest out of all of them. And they totally just leaned into that he was like the dorkiest one, right? That the new guy was kind of the coolest and Andrew Garfield's in the middle and Tobey was the older kind of dorky guy. And I thought it was great. And I think people forget that movies are entertainment. We're not here to smash. Like anytime, as soon as I read a review and it starts talking about political statements that were missed or something, like, no. That is, dude, we get enough of that with our bullshit news now that we see. And Rob, how much has it changed since we start? Like now it's like, I don't believe like any news. I'm just like, you're slanted here. Like it's all like, you can't even share a news article now because I'm like, they're all fake. They're all
fake, dude. All fake.
They're all just bending to their like. It would be so weird to do the culture eye now. Like now I look at like the mayor argument was such a big argument. And now it's kind of like, no, it isn't. Like So you on.
I really feel like we've gone through a wormhole. Like we're in the upside down. I don't know if you were a Stranger Things fan.
Oh yeah, big time.
Okay. Guilty. I did not watch. I haven't watched the newest season. I heard it was phenomenal, but I also heard
bounces back. Oh, it's really good.
Okay. It's one of those things where like, do I set the time aside to watch this? There's only so many shows that I do that for. And it's like, okay, I should probably go back and watch that. But I feel like we're in the upside down in the sense that like prior to the 2020 election, it's just like people were in a different kind of like, obviously before the crackdown or the lockdowns and all that jazz. But after that, man, when you go back to 2011, 12, your first appearance on Rogan, and you look at Twitter and you look at the people that were on Twitter, for one, there's more people on there now, but a lot of them are either bots, they're bot farms, it's all propaganda usage, it's all like you don't know what to trust. And I've been always heavy in the news. I don't remember if you had ever done a podcast with Jen Briney. She hosted.
Yeah, you connected with her. I did one of her. Yeah, she did that political podcast, right? And she was always big on the politics.
Yep, and she's still doing it. She runs through every bill basically she can and breaks down like what Congress is passing, right? So she's doing the Lord's work, as they say. And you know, that I've always been interested in it, but when 2020 hit, man, it's like we jumped into a movie of like Men in Black combined with like apocalypse, combined with like what is really going on. I don't believe anything that's going on the news.
No, nothing, and it's even migrated into Canada now. It's like the only news I listen to is kind of our local in Edmonton. Like I'll listen to Global Edmonton or City TV just to find out what's going on in the area. Like you know, we had a flood here, there's a snow thing, or this kid got. Because all the national news, like everything, I'm just like even now you're like, is that even a real website? Is that even the real Global? Or is that the any of it anymore? Anything. And it sucks because anyone in like government, I don't believe any of them. Like people say Biden, Trump, like I'm like, you both lie. You're probably friends behind back. There was a little bit of that, kind of that old Bill Hicks joke where it's like, well, I like the puppet on the right suits me. Well, I like the puppet on the left. But who's the person that has their hands in both puppets, right? That
Yep.
seems truer today than ever before. Like, and it just so divided now where people are like, you cannot have, you know, like the conversations Joe was having and you were having these great where like you'd have and be like, oh, I disagree with that. I don't really see that point. Like now it's like families like split up and won't talk to each other because you take a different point of view or, you know, believe in a different politician or something. It's crazy. Like it is honestly, it's definitely heightened from social media. I mean, there's science to show this, that the algorithms steer you in a certain direction because you only start seeing the things you want, and like confirmation bias comes into a whole new level. I mean, there's that great Netflix doc, if you haven't watched it, The Social Dilemma.
Oh yeah, I watched it.
Like crazy how all the creators of these platforms, like my kids aren't allowed to touch any of them, right? Because they will manipulate. But it sucks because then you have guys like me that like, I'm like, I don't see the only kids are training with Azelle. I've met a lot of great stuff has come from the internet, right? So it isn't all bad, but these algorithms are scary. Like I even look at my kids. I was a video game, PlayStation, stuff like that. But I don't like the games my kids play on their iPads because they're like gambling addictions, right? They're always like, get more coins, get more things. They're hitting you exactly like gambling. So your kids can't put them down. They never beat the game.
Yeah.
You know, when I took a couple weeks to beat Resident Evil, we beat that fucker and it was over. We didn't have to go get new armor and new thing every 2 seconds or a new hat to watch them. Like it was just over. You beat the story. It was over. So I definitely see how all this stuff is heightening, but I agree with it. Like, I look at how it's gone through the wormhole and it's just crazy. And COVID put it over the roof, right? It was just COVID was God bless Texas. I was so jealous when we're in Canada and things are locked down and our kids aren't able to go to school. I'm calling my parents. I'm like, oh my God, what are you guys doing? They're like, we just got back from the golf course. We're going to go for dinner. And I was like, what? They're like, because it's so weird. Like when you're there and everybody's doing it, you just kind of like, oh, this is how the world is operating. And we traveled. So this is where Canada, I'm really disappointed in my country. Our leader's a complete dolt too, just like he's an absolute idiot. It's funny. All my years traveling to the States, you know, 9 out of 10 people never say who our leader was. Everybody knows Trudeau because they all think he's a dolt too, right? It's the first time when I come to the States, like, oh, I know that Trudeau guy. He's horrible. I'm like, we agree. We don't like him either, but somehow he's there and he doesn't get out. But during COVID, he put out a message that was interesting that he talked about, like he really worded it in a sneaky way to make you feel like it was illegal to travel and leave the country. So I remember being like, oh, fuck, can't leave the country. We're like supposed to be in the middle of production for Breaking Olympia, but everything's shut down. And a few of my friends like, no, I don't think it's illegal, man. I think there's just quarantines and stuff, but it's not illegal. And then, you know, you call a lawyer and everybody's trying to figure out what are actually the laws, or are they mandates, or what are they? But then you were totally allowed to travel. But Canada would put out this message that this is what Trudeau said almost word, this is not the time for Canadians to be traveling. If you don't home, and you should stay home. Yet he would travel and everybody else would travel, right? Just do as I say, not as I do. But then we'd get these exceptional status and we were able to cross the border. And that's for me where it was really interesting to see. One of the pivotal moments is we're in Sweden filming for Dolph. And they were panned by the world media for a long time. Like they're killing their people. They didn't shut down. What horrible governments they are. We were in Sweden right when Alberta just re-shut down, my province, for those American listeners that, you know, in Canada. And my wife's calling me. She's like, oh my God, I have to homeschool the kids again. Everything's shutting down. I'm going to lose it. She's like, what's going on with you guys in Sweden? And we're like, we're about to go to a karaoke bar and have dinner because everything's open here. And it was so weird because you're so indoctrinated with everything that's going on that, you know, we're all wearing the M95s. We're walking through the airport and everybody's looking at us like, because there's like 5 of us together. And even in the airports, we're looking around and we ask, nobody's wearing masks. And we're like, hey, do you guys have a mask mandate? They're like, no, we have a mask recommendation, but you don't have to wear one if you don't want to. And we're like, oh, right away. Half my team was like, oh, I'm keeping I was like, off. Yeah. I took that shit off. And then the whole country, we were talking to people, they were like, hey, like, isn't COVID here? Like, they're like managing it. We built field hospitals that never got full. And we kept our elderly and those most vulnerable more protected, but we allowed other people to go. The biggest thing they had down was that bars and restaurants had to close at 10 instead of midnight or 2 o'clock was like the only restriction they had.
I'm surprised you're still there, dude.
Yeah.
No, I'm surprised you're still in Canada.
Well, it's open back up now, so thank God, because it was pretty. And it's funny because Alberta was obviously, we're one of the conservative states, so our premier was always pushing against, like, the other country. The rest of the country would just pan him, though, right? They'd be like, "Oh my God, he's killing your grandmothers," and blah blah blah, and right, and all the. And now you've seen, dude, like, there's always been conspiracy theorists, but I don't think there were more right. Like, and good conspiracies always have an element of truth, right? Which is what keeps them in a good conversation. But a lot of them I'd look at and I'd be like, oh my God, those are ridiculous, right? But the ones that, like, like, for me, when you look at all the things, like, when you're not getting the vaccine for you, you're protecting your grandmother and others. Well, now you have the vaccine companies come out and say, we didn't even test for transmission. You guys wanted Fast and Furious. We brought you Fast and Furious. And you're like, what? Like, we had whole campaigns in Canada. You're doing it for your community and blah, 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 blah. All bullshit. Have they ever come back and said, hey, we made a mistake. We probably shouldn't have kept your kids out of school, caused all the mental illness and homelessness. We've skyrocketed. Like, everyone's just trying to forget that like happened and how bad Canada had it. And I know, me as a parent, people would even say, well, we were never really locked down. I'm like, no, you didn't have young kids. We were locked down. When they shut down schools, and you take someone like my daughter that trains for hockey 5 to 7 days a week, depending, and all of a sudden, done. She's lost a year of eligibility. Like, go from training every day to you can't even leave your house. Even if you went to outdoor rinks, they didn't want more than 10 people outdoor playing. Like, they put caution tape around playgrounds and stuff outside. It was, when you look back now, you're like, absolute lunacy. But it's typical anyone in power, even if they did it intentionally for the right reasons or righteous reasons, they abuse it, right? And they're like, oh, well, people just listen. We'll just throw something else out next week and people will listen to it again.
Yeah. And when it comes back around, and again, like the last 3 going on 4 years now, I've been deep into the rabbit holes of what is, the conspiracies of the internet, or what's been going on, just prior to it, and whatever, like everything in between. I'm fascinated by it. I love keeping up with it. I don't care that it gives me anxiety from time to time. Like, I want to be able to dispel some of these things when I see it, because a lot of people that just take things at face value, as soon as they hear it on the news, or like the WHO or the CDC, oh, okay, yeah, okay. And I don't know if it's a product of growing up in Texas or in the country of Texas, and, being the ranch type, working with cattle and all that shit, where you just don't leave room for that kind of like gullibleness, if that makes sense. Like, wait a minute. You want us to do what? I can't go cut my son's hair now. And if I do, he has to have a fucking full face mask on to cut his hair. So it's safe to say that I pushed back a lot, just because it's kind of ingrained in me. Whereas I know a lot of people in more liberal states and even other countries, they just kind of went with it. And what I was going to say is, just wait for the next time that something comes around. They have tested, in my opinion, what bounds they can push, and they tested all of it, and they're like, man, we can do whatever we want, and most of them are gonna do it.
Well, that's where I think where I totally agree. That one part was fascinating for me too, because we traveled more than 90% of the world did during COVID, right? We had to shoot Breaking Olympia. So at one point we were in 6 different countries, and then like 6 different states, right? We were, for Dolph, we were in Sweden, UK, Spain, Switzerland, then the United States, and then Canada, right? And you could see every country did it differently. So seeing actually how different countries managed, and they all kind of had the same or similar results, right? People say, oh, well, like, it was originally Sweden. They'd be like, oh, well, they had more deaths per capita or whatever. But now that's leveled out big time, right? To the countries that were super arguments out the window. But, we were actually there. Very few people could actually travel. They were just pulling information from all over. We traveled, and I saw that all the different countries did it differently, and it was roughly the same results in every country, right? And most of the countries that didn't have a backlog, just put money into it. Like, Sweden never really had a backlog because they do have a very strong healthcare system, right? So even with their things wide open, they never got overrun because their healthcare system is strong, right? They built these big field hospitals, never had to use them. But then in the States, when I clearly just personally witnessing was like, oh my God, this is so political. Is, like I said, we went to 6 different states, and any blue state locked down like crazy. Couldn't get out, had to order food. It was like, you're like caution tape everywhere. Red states, wide open. And then Nevada was the biggest joke, because I call Nevada kind of a purple state. It kind of flops back and forth, right? It's kind of in the middle. it was 50% open. Where I was like, did you guys literally come and make a handshake deal like conservatives? And we're like, hey, we're kind of purple, so we'll just do 50%. Like it was a joke. It was a joke when and I remember my team, a lot of them from Canada, like we were even split in the car. Like people that were from like the more liberal provinces were kind of like, no, they wanted to have masks and this and like, and there was a part of me being like, guys, we all worked on the union and the culture high. Like we know how corrupt fucking pharmaceutical companies and the government are. We're just taking everything verbatim that
what a great point, Adam.
But like I didn't want to argue. We're trying to just get work done, right? But I was kind of like, when we start talking about it, I'm like, man, this shit just Brett, you and me, we worked on the union, but we know how corrupt they are. We know that when they said they were making with Percocets and Oxycontins, it was complete bullshit. They knew it was bullshit. But paying the fines and the lawsuits afterward was cheaper than having to remarket and make a new product. So they just fucking released it. So and I remember being like, guys, same as the drug war, same scare tactics, get you to do things. Like it seemed to me, it was just like, I'm like, man, this seems exactly the same. We're just talking about something else. But the one thing that they were that all kind of governments that were clever at is like the whole idea of infecting others and getting other. That was the one that was like the different argument. It's like, well, or you want to be a selfish prick, you're not helping your community, like you're killing other people. And I remember even then I was like, no, but if you're following the rules that you want to impose on me, then there's no way I can get your grandmother sick unless she's breaking those rules. Because the only way would be if she leaves the house to go somewhere that I would infect her, or you leave the house and you infect her. Because there's no way it just jumps from my house, or if I go to the gym and it jumps from the gym to her. Right. But people are like, no, you're just being difficult.
Inevitably, when the Castro kid, as they call your leader, when Castro kid shuts down your country again, Texas is wide open for you. There's a lot of land.
Let
me tell you this too. Central Texas, I've only been here 2 weeks. We just moved from Houston here about 2 weeks ago. I'm 30 minutes from the mothership. I'm 15 minutes from all the floating rivers and the fucking hill country and all this. So, I mean, I know I loved my H-Town, love the Astros and whatnot, but I think I'm in a better area now.
Well, because where you're now, you're like New Braunfels area.
It's like 30 minutes off of South Austin. It's like between New Braunfels and San Marcos area.
Yeah, no, that's a great. I mean, that was one of the first times I went and hung out when I moved to Texas. What's the big weekend where everybody goes down the river there?
Oh yeah, to go float the river basically.
I think it was July 4th. I was there. It was like the big time to go down there, and I went with a whole bunch of friends and had a blast down there. And no, you're in a great area. I hate, and same, like a lot of people flooded to my parents' have a place in Utah too. A lot of people, like LA now, man, is an absolute dump. When I go for work, like the main streets smell like urine, the homelessness is out of control. Like you really saw a lot of those people want to get out of the bigger cities when they saw how things went and everybody got locked down. People were like, whoa, I don't want any part of this. Like, so I know, and not to bring it to the negative COVID thing, but it was really just interesting for us because we traveled and and something that we were really torn about is that my wife and I didn't want to get our daughter vaccinated, right? Because she got Guillain-Barré syndrome, which some doctors and stuff had said could have been caused from the HPV vax that she'd got a few years before, right? Where she couldn't, it's really nasty. You lose motor function. Like she couldn't walk up the stairs. She was falling all the time. It's horrendous. I don't wish that on anybody's child. So we were legitimately scared that, anytime you're dealing with the vaccine, chickenpox and all the other ones that we thought were good and have had, we studied and did, safe and effective testing long-term, but we're like, man, this thing just came out. Like, I'm not eager to get it. Plus there was less than 20 kids in all of from COVID, and all of them were very sick anyway. Right. Like, dying with or of COVID was always the debate and whether it was. And it was like, she is not at risk. She literally has a better chance of getting struck by lightning than dying from COVID. Like I'm not, just the statistics that were in Canada. We didn't want to, but even Alberta made the rule where she's not allowed to go play hockey if she doesn't get vaccinated. Otherwise she has to have a PCR test before every practice. And now to give to those that don't have a kid in a competitive sport, and people say, oh, well, that's not restricting your life. Yeah, my daughter's on the ice every day. She's on the ice from Monday to Friday, and then Saturday, Sunday are games. The rink is 40 minutes from our house, so her and her billet would drive. But they could not, there's no way that you could get a PCR test. When she finishes school at 3:30, she has to be on the ice in 4:30. That is not possible. Plus to spend the time, they were charging $150 a test. She'd have to do that 5 days a week right? Because that's how often, if you include weekends, she'd have to do it 6 to 7 times a week just to be able to do the sport she loves. And people are like, well, she doesn't have to play hockey. I'm like, okay, she's 16 years old. She spent the last 8 years of her life making her dream to do. So you're saying half of her life she just has to throw away because she doesn't have to play a sport? You're not restricting her lifestyle? Bullshit. That's where we were like, we did not want to, but you could not get exemptions in Canada. They're like, nope, she wants to play hockey. She has to get it. That arenas, and it was ridiculous. And I got into a few times coming back from Canada when they would, because we had to quarantine when you came back. You're supposed to quarantine for 2 weeks, but I have a friend of mine that's a lawyer. I'm like, Hardeep, I want you to look into this. And he's like, Adam, it's a mandate. It's not a law. I'm like, what is the difference? He's like, it's not a law. So they can't arrest you. They can't do anything. The reason the cops are there is if you disturb the peace. If you start threatening them and getting violence, then they will arrest you for that. But it looks like everybody else, like they're arresting you for not following the mandate. So Riley was going over to the States and playing in tournaments and stuff when everything in Canada, when you weren't allowed on the ice in Canada, you weren't allowed, even outdoor rinks, you'd have bylaw officers coming and be like, oh, there's more than 8 people out here. We're about to issue fines. And I was like, give me a break. It's -30. We're outside. Like, joke.
Dude, real quick, like I had maybe 2 of these experiences where I kind of lost my cool, where it was like, I went to go return some, and this is in like the span of like I don't know, 3 months that it was really taken seriously in the suburbs of Houston, Texas. After that 3-month period, it was like, whatever. But I went to go return some Xfinity equipment at an Xfinity store, like a modem or some nonsense. And the guy in there was like, you need to have a mask to come in here. And the desk to return the equipment was as soon as you walked in the door. So I walked in, I turned to put my box down and just get a receipt from the person there. Like, need to put a mask on. I was like, I'm just returning. I don't need your service. You know, it's all I'm doing. And then immediately starts yelling across the store to an officer. Those are like, officer, he won't put his mask on. And I was like, oh my God, I was losing my mind. The cop walks over and I was like, you don't want to do this. He goes, you're right, I don't. But you either put your mask on or you need to leave. And I was like, I could have just been like, this isn't a law. This is a mandate. But I was inside the fucking business and whatever. And it would escalate really quick if you didn't just do what they said. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to take this box back. I'm going to ship it myself. So I didn't return it.
Well, that's the one different. Like, I'd always look in those situations where you're in their business, because any business has the right to refuse. Like essentially, right. Like, I don't like the way you look, and they can refuse your business. Right. So, but I know I had this instance when we were coming back from Nashville. We were going Nashville, Toronto over to Edmonton. And this is when things were starting to be pretty open, right? But they were still doing some tests, some provinces, but like things were getting pretty much back to normal. We were traveling, and I'm coming back and they put a sticker on my passport being like, oh, you've been randomly selected to get tested. Now, again, I'm a documentary film producer. I had to do so much research for every state, country, different tests. What wasn't, like, I probably had to read about more legislation than any. We all had to get COVID compliance certified, all this bullshit. So I was mad. I was not. I come back and the guy's like, no, you have to do a test. And he's like, you've been randomly selected. I'm like, well, if it's random, then I don't have to do it. Otherwise it'd be mandatory. So no, I'm opting out. I'm leaving. He's like, no, you have to. I'm like, you don't know. You just said it was random. So I don't have to. So take your sticker back. I'm leaving. And then he goes, hey. And he called 2 female police officers or Toronto airport connecting to, again, just a connecting flight, Nashville to Toronto over to Edmonton. So they come running over like, hey, like, you have to take this test. I'm like, no, I don't have to take this test because it's random. If it was mandatory and everybody had to do it, then I would have to. But random means that some business has set up something with the Toronto airport to make money, and they're randomly selecting people and they're justifying the cost. I'm not doing it. And the lady's like, oh, why don't you want to do it? I'm like, because I'm fully vaccinated by the requirements you got. I got my badge here. I had to spend $150 for each one of my crew to leave Nashville and come back to Canada. US, right, which is like 200 Canadian, so $1,000 in COVID tests. I'm like, no, I'm done playing this game. We spent $1,000 on COVID tests. We took the test yesterday. We're all fully vaccinated. Either the vaccine works or the test works or one of the 2 works, or I'm not doing this game. I'm over this game. I'm done.
I can't imagine. Go ahead.
Yeah, and then the cop goes, she goes, well, you're not going to be able to board your flight. And I go, that's just a straight out lie. I already have my boarding pass. My luggage is checked through. I'm like, do you enjoy lying to Canadian citizens in order to intimidate them to try to do something you want them to do that they don't have to? And you'd see the cop's eyes were like, I was like, because that's what you're doing right now. I was like, that is it. Why would you lie? That's a blatant lie. That is not truthful at all, and could get a fine. I'm like, you are lying too. I was like, I will not get a fine because I'm an Albertan, and taking a test in Toronto, I get to board my flight. You're not even going to send me the results until I get home. Does nothing for anyone other than this testing company is making money. That's all this is. I was like, I'm not. So either you guys are going to charge me for something because I know I'm not breaking the law, or I'm going to walk by you two ladies right now, right? Because you could see at one point they had their hands on their tasers and stuff. I'm like, relax, right? We're talking about not taking a COVID test. I was like, but either you guys are going to arrest me for something, which I've done nothing wrong. I've broken no law. And then they both were like hesitant, and then they moved their arms like this and let me walk by. And my crew was just like, oh my God, they picked the wrong guy.
And
then there's like 10 other people, and they're all like, well, we're not going to get tested either. This is stupid. We're leaving. And they all leave. And then the cops like, hey. Because my friend that's a lawyer had said there is not one person in our province that had actually been issued a fine for not quarantining or not. So I knew, and they're like, well, you can get a fine. I'm like, nope, there hasn't been one processed in the courts of Alberta. And there certainly isn't going to be one here when things are pretty much open now. I was like, this is simply a business that made a business decision with the Toronto airport, and they're trying to justify their costs, and I'm not playing it. And then walk by. And I remember, it's funny because you still get some people like, wow, I can't believe you would do that. And I was like, dude, I was done playing. All my productions are over budget because we had to spend thousands of dollars in COVID compliance and masks and tests. And a lot of times when we would travel, you'd leave on a Sunday, so there'd only be one place open, and they'd be like $270 member for a test, like absolute ripoff for all this stuff. It was so annoying. And here's the craziest part. In the 2 years, as I mentioned, I've been to 7 different countries, like 14 different states total, well over 35 flights, still have not got COVID. Or if I did, I got it so minor that I didn't know I had.
That's some strong immunity right there. Strong.
Everybody else I know that stayed in their house and got 4 boosters, they've all had it and they've been deathly ill by it. And say like, so I'm like, you can call whatever you want. And be like, well, that's all anecdotal. I'm like, well, I don't know how I could travel that. And of course, when I was in countries where you didn't have to wear a mask and shit, that shit was off, right? Like, I never go out of my this place, like no mask mandate, boom, off my face, right? Nothingness, like because obviously in other countries too, I never want to upset them to where they kick me out and I can't come back to film. So I never push. The only time I push is in my own country because you can't kick me out of Canada. So I'm like,
if anything, they'd be doing you a favor if they did.
Yeah.
That's crazy, man.
Renew my green card and come back to the US.
I real quick, and then we'll move on here. Do you think you'll ever leave Canada, like move out for good?
I don't think so. I think, just things are going good now. And kind of how my business works is that I'm able to mitigate the risk using tax credits and everything like that, right? And then we sell it. So typically the way I do for one of my films is we'll partner with somebody, we'll get their life rights, and then I'll pre-sell Canada. I'll sell it to Super Channel, which will trigger our provincial tax credits, trigger our federal tax credits. We can also tap into the Canadian Media Fund, which is a granting, get a nice healthy budget of like $500,000 to $1 million to shoot the film, and the rest of the world's rights are wide open. So then we can release it on all other platforms, or we can sell it to Netflix. So that's kind of how Dolph Lundgren and Bisming and all these people are like, wow, you can get that healthy of a budget, and I can pay them a life rights fee right up front. There can be some money to be made on the international sale and everything else, depending on how much I can, where the real kind of the full, like I can either fully mitigate the risk if I can get some of these grants, but a lot of the grants are first come, first serve, or like you submit. So you're never guaranteed that you get everything that you apply. When I do hit them though, we'll have $1 million budget with no gap couped on international sale. But if we don't, then there'll be a small gap of usually no more than 25%. So I found a really good business model that works for me that I don't, unless like LeBron James company or like Uninterrupted wanted to pay me just a ridiculous amount to manage their documentary division, then maybe I would look at it. But so far that has not happened.
All right. I got a couple of questions here before I let you go, man. I'm kind of asking these to all of my early guests that were previous guests, just to see how the last decade has gone. We already started with at the top of the show of how the last decade has treated you, but are there any particular goals that you're focused on these days in your career that are just, maybe related to documentary making or filming, or just any entrepreneurial endeavor that maybe is aside from it or along with it?
I think, for me, I really love what I do. So I want to keep doing it, but I've never been super money focused, but how much and how hard me and my team sacrifice to make these. I am trying to make them where they're not just providing a living now and stuff. I'm trying to be like, hey, I'm 42 now. I want to try to like really put away some stuff for my kids and kind of pave the way. So I'm really trying to do that, trying to hit some things I haven't done. Like I'd love to get into the top tier festivals that have always eluded me. An Emmy and an Oscar, not because I care about the awards or the adoration, but just that helps your business. Being able to say, Grammy nominated production company or Emmy nominated, Grammys for music, or Oscar nominated, those things help. That's the main reason I want it, not because, awards for art are kind of silly because they're so subjective, but I'm happy to take them if you want to give them to me. Right. So those are some things I'd like to knock off the bucket list and continue working with people I'm really inspired by. But I really do have my dream job. I get to travel. I get to make my own schedule. That's also probably why I don't work for another company. Is it's nice to be, if I want to come visit my parents in Texas with my boys, I can still do interviews, get caught up. I can still do that. I don't have a company that I have to put in vacation time or talk to HR or do any of that. Right. I can just tell the stories I want to tell.
Yeah.
So that would be it. Just trying to in my family's pocket with how hard we work, because we do put 2 to 3 years of our life into each doc. So it would be nice to, make a good living. And I'm definitely not complaining. Life is great, but just trying to put a little bit more security for my family would be one goal. And then try to hit some of those plateaus that have eluded me in the past 10 years.
So in the last 10 years also, have there been any big like self-development improvements that you've made that you could say thanks to a book or thanks to another doc or thanks to a mentor that you've had that have helped you professionally and personally?
You know what? That's actually something I've been listening to podcasts kind of again recently. And I haven't done enough self-improvement on myself. In my business, yes, I'm always looking ways to sharpen, but I think I've maybe got lost in that, if I'm being brutally honest, a little too much, right? That my boys have inspired me now where I'm going to start rolling next week. I ordered my gi, and I knew it came from a place of just ego and insecurity, that because I boxed competitively and I was good when I was younger. And, it's tough to be like, man, I'm really not looking forward to a year of just getting shit kicked. Right. Like, and I know that's just a fear, like it's an ego. I'm like, Adam, get over it. Like the jiu-jitsu community, like, it's so awesome. Like I love my boys. I actually like it better than the hockey community that my daughter's in. I love the jiu-jitsu. There's less bullshit. Your 2 kids go fight. The one that wins. Right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. Dude, so I just started. I put my gi back on last week for the first time in like 5 years, man. I hung it up at white belt. I got busy with the business and busy with other stuff. My wife actually got her blue belt last year. She's still been training. Wow. And we got it. Congratulations to her. So she's always like, come on, get back in there, get back on the mats. And then we moved and I was like, all right, like I'm going to get back to it. So because of I'm still traveling to Houston like twice a week, and our other stuff, our kids are in baseball, softball, all that kind of stuff. So it's trying to work out at least 2 days a week. Like if I could get 2 classes a week, I'm winning. And we went last night, and dude, last week. So when do you plan on training? Let me ask you that. Like when do you think you'll get on the mat?
Gone this Friday, but we're here. We're in Houston. So I would have gone with the kids and done the fundamentals and just learned the base. I want to just get as another way of exercise. I'm bored of just hitting the gym. I've done it for 25 years. And I'm just, my boys, I'm inspired. Both Ryder and Beckham are loving it, having great success. And I love the independence and confidence that I see in them. Like, I'm just like, man, what a great, and it's the culture, and their coach is great. And the other, like, I'm like, Adam, stop making excuses. You love watching them compete. Like even I like no moves. I'm like, take his back now, take his back. Because they're like, we're like, I know enough to be like, and everyone's like, Adam, why don't you come in? You're an athletic guy. You used to box. You'll do fine. And I know it's just my ego. Like, that's all. Like, at least I know it's just the fear of like, I was a good boxer when I was a kid. Like even that I'm not good at anymore. And I go back, I'm like, I remember being really good at this. Like I suck now. So
that's 42, brother.
And at this age, it's good. I don't want to spar anymore. I got my nose fixed so I can breathe, and I don't need the head trauma. So jiu-jitsu is the one that I'm like, Adam, no more. So I just ordered the gi, and I'm like, I'm going to start going to class. I'm like, that's the first step. I'm going to spend $1 on a gi. So get in there, get mangled, just learn. So I'm just going to learn fundamentals, and who knows, maybe a couple years, if I like it, then I might start competing with the boys and going with them. But I love watching them compete. They want to go to a tournament every weekend. They're like, Dad, when's another one? When's another one?
That's awesome, man. So we went to the first class last week here in the Central Texas area, and dude, I was wrecked for 5 days. Like it was so hard to go up and down the stairs at home. Like, put your fucking shoes on. I'm like, God, I remember what this was like when I first started. Now I got to do it again just because I stopped. I should have, if I would have kept going, I'd probably be a pretty close to a purple belt if I'd kept at it for 5 years. But regardless, it is what it is. So it's fun to go in there because you have knowledge and I do too, from being such a fan and being around people in the community. So you're not a total noob. Like when you're taught something, you're going to pick it up pretty fast, right? So
I'd like to think so, because I have maybe some boxing background, like techniques and stuff will click. We'll see, but maybe sometimes striking connects easier for people than the grappling, but we'll see. I'm excited to get into it. It's a new journey. I'm scared too, because I'm like, again, it's just my ego. So, but I've realized I haven't worked on myself enough the last little bit. Like I haven't been training as much. I'm not in great shape. Like a lot of things I'm like, Adam, quit letting it slide. Like you don't get a grip of it. You're 42. You get into your late 40s, it's gonna be hard to bounce back, right? So your question's a good one, because it kind of just reminds me, like, Adam, stop making fucking excuses. Start working on yourself now. Today.
One of my favorite quotes that I've heard in recent time is that we all think we do, like we think we do enough, like when it comes to work or our family, but we don't realize is that we're not always doing what's required. And when I first heard that, I'm like, God, that's so true, man. Just throw a dart at any aspect of your life and you can realize you're not doing what's required. You're just doing what you think is enough.
Yeah. No, agreed.
Yeah. So with that, let me ask you this final question. What are you currently obsessed with?
I'm currently obsessed more than anything, even more than my work or telling. I'm currently obsessed with watching my kids go after their dreams right now. Like maybe too much. Like I love watching my boys compete. I love watching my daughter go for her goals in hockey, and not trying to put like tremendous success. Everybody's like, Adam, you guys just raise like athletic killers. And I think the biggest thing you can do, and kind of Danny Trejo talks about this in Inmate, is make that time, right? We make time for work. We make time for a lot of things, but sometimes you don't make time for your kids, right? Sometimes people, and nowadays a lot of kids are making too much time, but I make a point, like I travel a lot and I'm gone a lot, but my kids, kind of like my stepdad was for me, that I remember him traveling a lot, but I don't remember him being absent. I don't remember having an absent dad. I always had a present dad. So I'm trying to make sure. And when I'm at the sports, I'm very present. Like I'm not on my phone distracted, kind of going, oh yeah. Like I actually jiu-jitsu, I am on my phone because I'm filming them fight, right? But
Yeah.
I'm like, but I'm right in it. And then my daughter, I'm enjoying, is I'm really making sure I enjoy those moments, because it's starting to hit me. 42. My daughter's got 1 year left of amateur hockey. Then she's off to college. Like there's a 95% chance she's going to play NC Div 1 somewhere here in the States. So I'm really kind of hyper focused on just watching them grow off to college, and my boys are going to blink and they're going to be gone too. So I've been making sure that with my company's never been busier and the success we're having, that I'm making sure that I spend that quality time with them. That's why even for this Houston trip, couldn't change the flights, didn't have a tournament, didn't care. Coming down to hang out with my parents and spend time with my kids. Is it the best time? No. Really busy. I got lots of shit I should be doing. I'm doing work, and that's like whatever.
I love that answer, man. I kind of knew that's probably what it would be, because I do see you post, and your wife too. Like I followed your wife on social, or we followed each other since I first met you, and it's cool. It's like it is always about the kids. Like it's about, like sometimes it's about work, sometimes it's about y'all each other, but it's about the kids, like hockey and the sports and everything. So that's really cool. And I'm the same way. Like I get to be the stepdad to some really cool kids that I've been in their life since they were like 3, and now to have them grow up. They're both gray belts now in jiu-jitsu, so they've been training for like 2 years. They started baseball and softball. We got practice today. We got a game Saturday, a game Friday. And I'm so in on all that. I'm like, yeah, I don't want to miss a game. I don't want to miss a practice. Like,
No,
it's
me
so
neither.
bad.
Love it. Love it. The one thing I would say, Rob, is just I've been using that excuse to be like, when I'm like, well, I could work out, or like the boys got, I can just watch their practice. So I've been using it as a crutch to not work on me.
I can see that. I can see
do
that.
want to try to be a little better on working on me too, being like, Adam, you do enough to not have to. Like even my parents, when I hear like Adam, they're like, wow, you're a great dad. Like almost maybe because like we feel good as parents that we've got you to be so involved in your kids' lives. Where
For sure. And I think what you have too that you're going to be able to give them that a lot of other, unfortunately, dads may not have, is like the ability to communicate effectively in and out of sports. So that's going to be tremendously helpful for them.
I hope so. And as you're learning, as you're a parent now too, as you learn your realize once you become a parent, you're like, oh, our parents didn't know what the fuck they were doing either, just like I don't, right? And you're learning as you go. And there's times you make mistakes. There's times I yell at my kids. I'm like, oh my God, I think I was a little too harsh, or times maybe it wasn't harsh enough. And that's where I can't stress enough to those that are listening that might not have their kids in sports. Like, you can say it's a rat race and there's money in politics. Yes, there's all of those things, but those things are preparing your kids for life, because life, like, so much of what happens to Riley, politics, bad coaches, this and that, the struggles. I'm like, that is exactly like an office, right? You might have a job you really love, but your boss is a prick, and your manager is hard to deal with too. And the politics, and they're cousins, so they help each other out, even though you're doing all the work. Like, the same battles you go through, they are great for life, because they're so many. I'm always like, Riley, this is just like life. Like, things aren't fair. And some people are going to be genetically, even if you work. My daughter is one of the hardest working players I know, and she's always had success because, and you'll have some kids that are genetically, like Riley's like, Dad, I could train track and explosive training for 5 years and I could never have the first 3 steps like so and so. I'm like, no, you're probably right. She has amazing genetics and will have advantages you won't, but you will have other things that you can bring, right? I can't. And then martial arts for boys, I don't think there's a better one, because the humility that is brought. I don't know if you've ever been to one of the tournaments where your kids are gray belts, when they go, like, there's so much tears. There's tears all over. Like, every kid that loses is crying.
Yeah.
And even right now, it's an interesting one I have with where my oldest is very good. He just got his yellow belt, very, very technically good. And he's been smashing most people. I think he's had 68 matches and he's only lost 8. Wow. Right. So he doesn't lose very much. But losing, whenever he does lose, he'll be like, oh, I hurt my arm, or like, and his coaches are nice, but then I play the bad cop and I get mad. I'm like, oh, are you hurt? Okay, so let's leave. We're going to cancel the nose dislocated. Like, we got to go to, and then he's like, no. I'm like, then stop with this hurt shit. You're either, the difference between being, are you hurt or are you injured? If you're emotionally hurt, and I have this talk with them, say, hey, I love that you don't like to lose. I don't mind the tears. I don't mind that you don't like, that's good. Wanting to be a competitor and be the best of what you are, not losing, there's nothing wrong with that in life. But don't make an excuse that you're hurt, you're this or that. I'm like, I don't want to see that anymore. If you lose the match, you shake the kid's hand. He's the better kid for the day, because you've done it to dozens of kids, right? So do not. And then we had this talk the last tournament. He was kind of like, I made him cry even more. And then I felt really bad, because I was like, Ryder, I was like, if you keep doing this, I'm going to take you out of jiu-jitsu. I hate how you pretend you're injured every time. And it's like, that's got to stop when you lose. And then he really started to cry. And then when I made him right with his full tears, I'm like, you didn't shake the kid's hand after the match. I want you to go over him and his dad right now. And he's like, right now? And I'm like, right now, can't. And then he sucked it up. And then I came in with the good cop talk and I said, Ryder, look, losing is part of this. You're going to lose in every sport you do. And I like that you don't like it. I don't want you to be like, oh, I'm okay with losing. That is not how our family raises anyone. Losing sucks in anything. Sucks in work, sucks in life. Losing sucks. But all you can do is constantly train and prepare and put the best version of yourself out there to compete. And you did everything you could, and then you learn and you get better and you go do it again. So then Ryder, his recent loss is a kid that beat him 3 times. And you'll respect this, Rob, because you rolled. So in the third match, they both have a great triangle game. They both have long legs and big feet. So now they go to no-gi, and I'm like, Ryder, do not go into, like, if he pulls, I don't think he has any wrestling. Just stand up, make him stand up with you. Don't get into his game. So sure enough, Ryder pulled in and then goes down. He's like, no, Dad, I think my top game is good. I'm like, well, I wouldn't go to his strength, but sure. Ryder gets caught again in the triangle, then gets to a mounted triangle. And the other coach is worried about Ryder pass. His face is going beet red. Coach is like, hey, make sure he's not passing out. The bad dad. I'm like, he's fine. And I could see Ryder. All of a sudden, the kid moved. And all of a sudden, like, Ryder was just about to tap. And then he's like, wait a minute, I can breathe. He just shifted. And then Ryder got his leg in there, flipped him over, took mount, 1-7-2, broke the triangle, 1-7-2, and was like, and I was like, Ryder, I'm like, that is what the adversity. This is a kid that's beat you 3 times. Out of your 8 losses, 1 kid beat you 3 times, submitted you, and had you again. 99% of kids would have tapped in that one. The fact that you battled through and pulled out the win 7-2 and flipped it around, couldn't be more proud. I don't care what medal you get. That shows me that after you were tearing up and everything else and upset, that you can pull it together and you can battle through. That is what a real champion. If you really want to go far in this, you have the ability. And he was on cloud 9, right? And then the next tournament, he's like, Dad, he's like, I don't want to lose ever again. So this next tournament, he smashed everyone. Minute 30, all done, to where his professor's giving him the challenge for next tournament. He said, you're not allowed to use triangles next tournament. You have to win the whole next tournament using different techniques because your triangle's just killing everybody at this age. So he said,
Ryder's like, funny. Wait till he finds Gordon Ryan. He's gonna be like, Dad, Gordon Ryan doesn't lose. What do you mean? Well, difference. We got Mexican supplements. We got all kinds of things going on there.
You got a little help there.
Dude, so I'll let you get on with your day. Now you got some activities down there in the sunny area of Houston. I know you're going to the beach maybe or something like that, hang out with the family.
Tomorrow. We're going to go see Azelle today. The boys are training.
That's right. That's tomorrow.
Private, and then they're going to roll in the kids' class. And Azelle said, hey, Adam, you know, my kids have only done like one tournament. I'm like, well, don't worry. We'll tell Ryder to take it easy. But Becca, my youngest, goes, do I have to take it easy? And I'm like, nah, nice. He's only 8, so he's they're eager. So yeah, I'm excited. It's kind of cool, kind of serendipitous that you reached out at this time. And
yeah,
very cool. To Azelle, and he's got his own gym. And my boys are like, Dad, you know another black belt? Like, you seem to know them all over the place. Like,
that's so cool. Like, so let me ask you this. Where can people follow? Like, what do you have coming up next? What's the next film? Is it the Phil Heath one? Is there anything before that? Yeah,
so actually Thunder, so our first true crime, Life and Death of Arturo Gatti, will be releasing in Canada here on Super Channel in May, and then I think it'll be releasing internationally in the fall. So if you love true crime stuff, like inside, like with the Aaron Hernandez story and some other ones, you're gonna love this. It's the first time we've done one like this. Really cool story about Arturo Gatti and his mysterious death down in Brazil. Then we've got Breaking Olympia. We'll be releasing this fall. And then hopefully we premiere Dolph Lundgren's doc, which I think we're going to call it I Must Break You. Obviously his most iconic line, but there's some metaphors to him breaking down himself. And then we're in production on both Dane Cook's doc and Biff Naked's, the musician, the Canadian icon. So we're busy. If people can follow me, you can go to scorgieproductions.co and you can see the website and kind of follow. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter as Twitter's Adam Scorgie, spelled like as my name sounds, Score with a big G, or Instagram is just Scorgie. Yeah, and I mean, Rob, that's how we connected. So you can say when I say I'm very approachable, and I think I'm one that can actually answer that bell.
That's true, man. So I appreciate the time. Also, go sign up for the newsletter on Scorgie Production. I'll have everything in the show notes. ScorgieProductions.com. I get the email all the time with all the info. So if you're interested, you do make some of the just flat out, honestly, best documentaries I've ever gotten to watch. Brett, I assume, still works with you, right?
He's doing the Dane Cook one, and he directed Breaking Olympia. We're forever together, those two. We built our careers on each other. And yeah, a lot of the same team works over and over again.
That's awesome, brother. We'll enjoy the rolling tonight with the kids. Take some good video, post it on your social so we can check it out. And hopefully we'll do it in the fall again when the films come out.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, brother. Take care.
All right, man. Peace.
See ya.